Hello and welcome to the Daily Journal's Capital View webcast. I'm Chris Kiefer, managing editor for multimedia here at the Daily Journal. And as always, I am joined by Daily Journal Capital Bureau Chief Bobby Harrison to talk about the latest in state politics. Bobby, how's it going down there today?
All right, Chris, we just got the House and Senate in session right now, taking up a bunch of bills. I don't know any of them in any consequence, but they're moving through the calendar to meet a Thursday deadline to take up bills, and the bill has to pass out of one of the two chambers or it dies. That doesn't happen by Thursday, so that's where we are right now in the process.
So they're racing the clock.
Yeah,
we'll talk a little bit as we get on into the show, kind of about what you're looking at coming ahead and what might happen the next couple of days. But I wanted to talk first about an issue that we've talked about a lot as it's kind of worked its way through the process, and that's the need for more funding for transportation. And as we've said before, there's generally a consensus that we need more money, that the state needs more money for road and bridge repairs, and that they've got a lot that are in need of repair, and that the existing method to pay for that, which is the gas tax, isn't bringing in enough money to meet those needs. The problem, as you've talked about before, has been how do you get that money and where should it come from? You had a story Sunday that looked at, I guess, the latest proposal to come from the transportation chair in the House, Charles Busby. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, what he and this bill actually, getting way deep into legislative weeds, Chris, if you will. This bill hadn't even been, well, maybe it's been filed by now. I hadn't checked on it lately, but it hadn't been as of last week, and it definitely hadn't been considered in the process because it's under a different deadline. It's what you call a revenue bill, which means it has what they're working on right now that I referenced earlier with our general bills, but that would be a revenue bill, and what it would do would be to increase the gasoline tax, and you may have the numbers there in front of me. I think it's 12 cents over 3 years for the gasoline tax, and or over 4 years for the gasoline tax, and 15 cents for the diesel fuel tax over 5 years. It would increase those taxes by that much, while cutting the income tax. And this is where it kind of gets tricky, Chris, is that the income tax is one of the major sources of revenue to fund what called the general fund agencies. That's education, healthcare, public safety. I mean, just pretty much all the major aspects of state government, except for transportation. Transportation, as you referenced, has its own funding source, and that is primarily on the state level, the tax on motor fuels. Now, what Busby is talking about doing is reducing money going to the general fund by reducing the income tax, while at the same time increasing the money going to transportation by increasing the fuel tax. And I guess his thought is that it'd be you'd have more members willing to vote for an increase in the gasoline tax if they were reducing another tax at the same time. The only problem with that is if it's a problem for somebody would be that there's already been about 50 tax cuts to general fund agencies that that's over the next 10 years going to take about $750 million out of the general fund. So at some point, all these tax cuts to the general fund are going to, there's already been significant cuts to general fund agencies, and this would probably guarantee some more cuts if this did come to fruition. But that's a proposal that Busby plans to introduce to the full House, or to introduce to the committees in the coming weeks, and we'll see if if that proposal gets out of committee and is taken up by the full House.
Sure. Going to that proposal, as you said, the current gas tax is 18.4 cents a gallon.
Yes,
that sound right? I'm
looking
right for that. And so this would, as you said, it would raise that 18.4 cent up to another 12 cents. So that'd be 30.4 cents on the gas tax. There'd be a 15 cent per gallon increase, just as you said, on the diesel fuel tax. There's also a couple of other fees in here. I guess part of the issue with the gas tax is you've got more energy efficient cars that aren't getting as much gas. So kind of this would make up some of that. It would have a $300 annual fee on electric vehicles, $150 annual fee on hybrids. And then I guess the other thing is it would have an inflation index in it too. Is that right?
Right. So that's been one of the issues with the current tax structure. I mean, it's been the gasoline tax. I mean, it's been 18.4 cents per gallon since '87, And while there's more cars on the road now, and people are probably driving more, the cars are much more energy efficient, so the cars get much better gas mileage. So what we have is a tax, a revenue source for the State Department of Transportation that is not growing. I mean, those taxes on gasoline are not producing any more money in real dollars than they were in 20 years ago. So while transportation, the cost to maintain roads, the gravel, asphalt, all those things are just skyrocketed in price over the past 20 years. The gasoline tax hasn't gone up to help to pay for those increases, and how much it costs to buy materials to fix and build roads.
Sure. Explain, Bobby. So getting back now, as you said, they're trying to find ways to get more money, and the onus, I guess, behind this proposal is the idea that there's been a lot of failure to be able to get support for a tax increase, and that's why they haven't been able to find more money. The belief on this is that by reducing the income tax, you balance that. While you increase the gas tax, you reduce the income tax. It kind of balances out. Explain to us what would happen to the income tax. Your story said it would phase out over 3 years. The 4% income tax bracket levied on personal income between $5,000 and $10,000. That's, I guess, maybe I don't. Besides going through the TurboTax program and what it tells me to pay, I don't understand exactly how it's levied. So this is the second $5,000 worth of your income you pay 4% on, and it would eliminate that?
Yeah, there's 3 tax brackets, and one of them's all being eliminated already. You got the 3% bracket, the 4% bracket, and the 5% bracket. And, and the 5% bracket is the and I don't know, I don't have the numbers in front of me as far as when each bracket kicks in, but the 5% bracket would be for the on the top scale, and okay. So it would eliminate, and one of those tax brackets, and I'm the lowest tax bracket has already been eliminated on the past legislation passed. So you'd be phasing out. You're already phasing out about a significant portion of the income tax. This would phase out even more of it, and I think this particular phase out would be about $150 million hit to the general fund. Chris, you have that.
That's right. 165 is what you had in your story.
165. And Busby says his proposal to increase the motor fuel tax and the fees on electric and hybrid cars would produce more than $300 million. So it'd be producing more money for transportation while not taking as much money out of the general fund. But as I said, at some point, they're going to reach a tipping point on how much money they can take out of the general fund. Some people would maintain they've already reached that tipping point, but this would definitely get them, if they hadn't reached the tipping point, this would definitely get them closer to it to eliminate another bracket on the income tax.
Yeah, you had a quote. You quoted Senator Hod Bryan of Amory in your story, and he said, again, getting back to that tipping point you just mentioned, but he said long term, basically, if we keep up the tax cuts, we're not going to have enough money to be able to maintain the core functions of government. The other concern he had about, and as you said, he's been a supporter of finding more revenue for transportation needs, but he doesn't like the gas tax as a method to do that because he feels it's disproportionate towards poor residents who are affected by it more. Talk through that, and I know you kind of had a response from Busby to that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the use taxes, if you will, and that's by definition a use tax or sales taxes, where we're all paying the same price for a gallon of gasoline or a gallon of milk. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody needs that gallon of gasoline. You need that gallon of gasoline if you're a minimum wage worker at McDonald's, or if you're the CEO of Bancorp South. You both need that gallon of gasoline to get to work, and but it is costing that minimum wage worker at McDonald's more for that higher
percentage of his income. Sure.
income to get to work. So by that definition, that is considered a regressive tax. And some people would argue in a state like Mississippi that has the largest percentage of poor people in America that regressive taxes that have a larger impact on poor residents is not the way to go. Other people, quite frankly, a lot of Republican leadership like use taxes, if you will, and don't like the income tax. So for that reason, I think this proposal might have some legs in the legislative process. We have a number of regressive taxes in the state already. We have a, generally speaking, very minimal sales tax compared to what most states have, even though there are some states that don't have any sales tax. And we have one of the higher sales taxes. I think I said that right. We have a very low income tax, but we have a very high sales tax, which is considered a regressive tax. And in our tax, we have the highest state imposed sales tax on food in the nation. And of course, some people would argue that food shouldn't be taxed at all because everybody needs that gallon of milk or a loaf of bread to feed their kids. And so this would just make Mississippi, to increase the taxes on gasoline would just make Mississippi even a more regressive state in terms of its tax structure.
Sure. There are other proposals out there as this goes forth, as you mentioned, one of which would involve the use tax, which is the online tax, the tax on goods bought online, and take some of that money and send it towards transportation needs. The Senate, though, still hasn't.
Now, Chris, that would also, that proposal would take over $100 million out of the general fund to divert taxes collected on online sales and divert that to transportation needs on the local level, which is another House proposal that's pending in the Senate now. That would also take money out of the general fund. I think the general theme of my story, if you will, from Sunday was, so far all that's been proposed all the bills proposed so far to deal with the infrastructure problems takes money out of the general fund, and a lot of people who feel that that there needs to be more money for infrastructure needs, road and bridge needs, are not amenable to taking money out of the general fund, taking money away from education or health care or law enforcement. So that's going to be a real dilemma as we go forward in this process. And it's important to remember, Chris, that revenue bills, any of these bills, are going to take a 3/5 majority to pass. The only proposal that's been considered that it doesn't take money out of the general fund, if you will, and it's been talked about briefly, and it appears to be dead for the session, but who knows, it may be revived. The only proposal that wouldn't take money out of the general fund is to enact a lottery where the revenue from the lottery went directly to transportation needs.
Sure. And then there's also a talk, I guess, a proposal that I don't know if it's been filed, that would allow residents to vote on whether or not to raise the gas tax. And I guess that one wouldn't come with an income tax decrease. So that would be new revenue also, correct?
Right. That bill has been filed, is pending in the Senate Transportation Committee, I believe. And it's also on that revenue deadline. So it's not dead yet. It hadn't been taken up, but it's not dead. And that would be a proposal to allow the residents of Mississippi to vote on some proposed tax increases on motor fuel, on a fee on the purchase of tires and those types of things to deal with the transportation needs.
Sure. Moving on, Bobby, tell us about the I guess Alice Clark, Democrat in the House from Jackson. She had a proposal through an amendment last week to another bill that would revive the issue of looking at equal pay for men and women and requiring businesses to do that. Tell us about her proposal and kind of how it all came about, I guess kind of suddenly during the debate on another issue.
Yeah, it was another issue. There's been members, political leaders and elected officials trying for years to pass an equal pay bill law to require equal pay for the sexes, for males and females, but it had never gone anywhere. But this bill, Clark offered this amendment to another bill, and it passed the House overwhelmingly, and now it's going to go into the Senate. So it was kind of a coup for the Democrats. The minority Democratic Party uh, doesn't get many coups in this process. That was, you could say, that was one for them, and that they were able to kind of surprise the Republicans and offer this amendment to another bill. And as I said, it passed by a wide margin.
Yeah, and as you said in your story, the Republican, so it passed initially by 74-40 margin, and that as you wrote before, journeying for the weekend, members changed their vote, and the final tally was 84-32. But also the politics behind it. You said all those voting against it were members of the Republican majority, including the speaker. But there's also a lot of Republican support for the issue. You mentioned that Representative William Tracy Arnold of Boonville is a Republican who has filed bills in support of this issue in the past. I guess talk through the politics a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, and he filed a bill and has been in favor of gender pay equity, if you will. And of course, one of the most outspoken officials on that issue in recent years has been Republican Treasurer Lynn Fitch.
Mm-hmm.
She's kind of made that one of her campaign planks, and so while Democrats overwhelmingly have supported that issue, there's been multiple Republicans who also been in support of it. I think, Chris, that according to information I've been able to ascertain, only Alabama and Mississippi are the only two states that don't have some type of law dealing with this issue of equal pay for men and women.
Yeah, and you mentioned there that some of the laws, even though they're in the books, are considered weak. But tell me, I guess, what is the argument? To me, I guess it almost seems like a no-brainer that you would have equal pay. I mean, I don't understand why it would be different. What is the argument from those who oppose to this bill? Just the idea of government telling businesses what to do?
That, and there's also people who would argue that there's federal law on this issue now, so there's not a need for state law. Fitch is, she provided studies in the past showing that the pay gap, and while I believe these numbers are right, the pay gap nationwide is like 19%, whereas in Mississippi it's more like a 27% pay gap between men and women. So that she maintains that the law is especially needed in Mississippi. And then she also we were talking about the number of poor people in Mississippi. She points out that there's a sizable number of single family households in Mississippi run by females, and if they're making less money, that puts more children into poverty, because these single moms, that they're making less than their male counterparts, is they have children are probably going to be living in poverty. And so she believes that this will help at least move the poverty line a little bit in Mississippi, which is something that we all want to see happen. But that's the main argument, is that we shouldn't mandate to businesses. There's a lot of Republicans that believe in free markets and let businesses deal with this issue on their own. And also, there's also a belief that there's federal law, so there's not a need for a state law, which, is kind of ironic in, the Mississippi legislature, because we tend to be passing all sorts of state laws to try to trump, if you will, federal law. Sure. So that's kind of a ironic argument.
Sure. Where does this bill go now, Bobby? I guess the equal pay part was actually just an amendment to an existing bill, and that bill itself is still in the House. Is that right? And then it would still.
As of this morning, it's headed to the. And you mentioned the vote, and the vote on the final bill is even a bigger margin. So I mean, there's only about 10 members voting against it, and ironically, most of those members were Democrats who were voting against the bill because of its original purpose, which is still in the bill. Which the original intent of the bill was to prevent municipalities from making laws dealing with employment issues. It would prevent a municipality from passing an ordinance to mandate an increase in the minimum wage above the state level. That was the original, or prevent a municipal government from banning the use of plastic bags or something other. So that was the original intent of the bill, but Clark amended it to add that equal pay amendment.
Sure. And so it now goes to the Senate. The language, I guess, important for people who are interested, the language of the amendment that Clark proposed says, quote, no employer may pay an employee a wage at a rate less than the rate at which an employee of the opposite sex in the same establishment is paid for equal work. And as you noted in your story, the amendment has some exceptions, such as maybe a pay disparity based on seniority. Moving on to another issue you wrote about this weekend is looking at the VOTEC curriculum. It's Donnie Bell from Fulton, representative, has talked about the possibility of forming a study committee to look at what the state is doing in terms of its public school K-12 VOTEC curriculum, and maybe making a committee to see if any changes need to be made.
Yeah, that's that's just kind of the ongoing effort of the of various state leaders to deal with what appears to be a lack of jobs for particular high skilled but sort of not more blue collar type jobs that pay well. It may not require college education, but may require some special training. And there just seems to be a lot of those jobs out there going unfilled. And this is kind of dealing with that issue. And Bell, said that he believes that, for instance, he gave the example of, somebody going to a sort of a crafts trade may not need algebra. They may need a more specific type of math. And that's just the type of things the study committee is going to look at and make recommendations to the 2019 legislature. And so that he said he's been trying to get this study committee formed for years, and it passed the House, and now that it's up to the Senate to approve it or reject it now. So we'll see how that goes in the coming weeks.
Yeah, that committee would consist of 13 members, and it would include the state superintendent of education. Other members would include people representing manufacturers and other employers. And the Speaker, Philip Gunn, Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, legislators would that's who would make the appointments, correct?
Yeah, right.
Would be the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor and the legislature.
Yeah.
Got it.
And the governor, I believe the governor would have some appointments too. I might not have put that in the story, but I think the governor also would have some appointments.
Okay, sure. So that you said that went through the House and now goes through the Senate.
Right.
Got it. All right. Well, now just kind of taking a step back, I guess, broadly. You talked at the top of the show. Another deadline's coming up. Last week, we got through the deadline of bills having to get through the committee in which they originated. Now they've got to get through the chamber. I think you said that deadline is Thursday. Kind of what are some of the biggest issues now to be on the lookout for the next couple of days?
Well, I mean, the biggest issue by far, Chris, is the voucher bill to expand the special needs vouchers and open up to general students. That bill is on the Senate calendar. That's by far the biggest bill remaining. I mean, a lot of the other focus is on the transportation issues that we talked about aren't on this particular deadline. But you got the voucher bill. There's also a bill that some people are concerned about that would make all the elected school board members elected during the same year instead of having staggered terms like they have now. A lot of public education advocates oppose that bill. They say that having the staggered terms for school board members where you don't lose them all at one time keeps a lot of institutional knowledge on the board and has worked well through the years. They don't want to change that, but there's a proposal on the Senate calendar that would, as I said, would make all school board members elected, I believe, in the same year to statewide elections. All 5 members would go up at the same time, so you could theoretically have a completely new school board every 4 years.
Is that only for districts that are currently elected, Bobby, or would that make all districts?
It would not affect districts that currently have school board members appointed by the mayor and the
city council,
city boards. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I guess looking back each week, we kind of do some weekly awards, looking at the most impactful legislation, most impactful legislator, and the weirdest moment of the week. Walk us through those.
Well, I'm gonna. We talked about Alice Clark. I mean, she, that was quite a coup for her to get that equal pay amendment added to that bill. She, people may know her. She's a Jackson legislator, a long time Jackson legislator, but she has kind of built some sort of a bit of statewide name identity because she files bills every year to enact a lottery. I mean, she has been faithful for years filing those bills, and but she kind of got a name for herself by surprising the House Republican leadership by offering that amendment. So that was an impactful moment by her. So I would say she's the most impactful legislator.
What about the most impactful legislation?
Well, I don't know how impactful it actually is, Chris, but I found it an interesting piece of legislation. There was a proposal that passed the Senate last week that would apparently on the location of University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson used to be the state insane asylum. I forget, it had a not a very politically correct name. I forget, but that it was operated in the early 1900s and late 1800s. And there was between 3,000 and 7,000 residents of that facility who were buried on the University of Mississippi grounds there in the medical center in Jackson. And there was legislation passed the Senate last week to allow those bodies to be disinterred and moved to another location to open that up for medical center expansion there in a sort of central Jackson area. Mm-hmm. And it also, said there's the University of Mississippi Medical Center has formed a coalition, if you will, to work on this issue. They believe that it would not only open up their, provide them more space for expansion, but also would provide for archaeologists and anthropologists and those and historians an opportunity to kind of study what went on in those types of facilities during those years. And so it's viewed as serving two purposes: to open up the land for expansion, but also to provide scholarly work on a group of people during a particular time in the history of the state.
Sure. And the name of that hospital was the Mississippi Hospital for the Insane. So like you said, not the most politically. I wouldn't think so.
Unless they just filled it with journalists, and the people would probably think that was okay.
Right. It would it would be a redundant name, I guess, if it was filled with journalists.
Yeah, right.
Bobby, is that the strangest moment of the week too, or is there something else?
Well, I mean, I just thought it was it could be either one. So just call that both. I do think that you could also was a strange moment because, like I said, the Democrats don't win many floor fights in this current environment in the Mississippi legislature, and for Clark to have that amendment passed, that was kind of a strange moment too. And then you see all the Republicans changing their votes on it to make sure they were in support of it. So that was kind of a strange moment.
Does that happen much? Do votes get changed much after the actual vote takes place?
Yeah, actually, it was kind of a strange moment. One day when there was a number of votes being changed on the House floor, Representative Steve Holland stood up and asked. He said he voted in the early '80s, I guess it was, to close the state's 3 charity hospitals. He changed his mind on that. He wanted to change his vote on that particular issue, and of course that couldn't be done. But generally speaking, it has to be done the day of the vote, or maybe I guess you have one day you can do it the next day. And the changes in votes, if the whole group of people go to change their vote, and then you get to the point where the people change their votes, change the outcome of the bill, the person who would change the outcome on the bill can't change his vote. So and all it takes is one member objecting, then the member can't change his vote. But in today's environment, nobody objects because everybody thinks they may be the one next time wanting to change his or her vote.
Sure.
So and that's done more in the House. There's a different scenario in the Senate to change votes, but it essentially happens in both chambers.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. That does it for another episode of Capitol View. We thank you for watching us. Again, you can catch us each week coming to you live at djournal.com talking about Mississippi politics. I know our normal time slot, we always say Monday at 2. We really haven't been there in a while just because of different scheduling things. In fact, Bobby, we'll talk. We'll kind of come up with time. I think I've actually got something next week, Monday at 2, the best place to find us is on Twitter. If you look on Twitter, we'll tell you kind of what our time's going to be that week. And that's how you can watch us live at djournal.com. We're also available in the video gallery on the Daily Journal website. You can see the replay there. You can see the replay on our Facebook page. So thanks for joining us. Bobby, thanks as always for your insight. And we will see you next week.